we are Team 6832 Iron Rain, and this is our presentation on the experimentation and innovating we've done this past summer. So as you may already know, over the past couple of years, we've had some pretty crazy summer projects. This included robotifying an RV and an excavator. But this summer, we decided to focus on projects that we could implement into future competition robots.
We wanted to explore designing a Swerve module off robots so we can make a lot of progress before the actual game revealed, so it can be incorporated into whatever game format or competition there is this upcoming season. We have attempted to do Swerve modules in the past, but this is our first attempt at actually prototyping and polishing a design before we put it into a full chassis and play around with it.
So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what our Swerve module is composed of. So here you can see we have one servo which controls the steering, so it's what makes the actual module rotate. Then we have a motor which actually powers the wheel, and of course we have custom housing for our servo and our motor, and our custom housing also controls our pulleys and our belt, which causes the entire module to rotate. And the rectangular base plate, which you can see there, is only a stand-in, and it can be modified however we need it to, so that it can fit into whatever chassis design we decide.
So here we showcase our progression from version 1 to version 4. Version 1 didn't account for motors or servos at all, and then version 4 is our final, or not our final, but our current fully working Swerve unit. The two changes that we made were these changes to running one part wheel and a fully custom servo unit.
We got the idea from another team's Swerve module we found on Discord. From there, we started our initial sketches with 2 pulleys and the general shapes we wanted our module to look like. The sketches are rough, but they're always helpful when it comes to visualizing our ideas for the final product.
So this is version 1 of our Swerve. The steering is controlled by the bottom built-in pulley, and the translation is powered by the top pulley. We quickly moved away from this design as we saw that it was quite inefficient due to the excess amount of current needed to actually power this. And if we use an appropriate size pulley, we can get way too much space.
So this is actually our second iteration of the Swerve here. We didn't have a way to steer using, we hadn't quite got to our servo yet. But we did transition away from the big pulley for the motor and the wheel itself and doing direct drive instead. We figured out a way to control the steering using a steering cap, which has a pulley built in for the external servo to control for the rotation of the wheel in the horizontal direction. And it also grips the module by sandwiching the bearing in place. And we also transitioned to a new wheel core using 3 internal parts instead of 2.
So to actually use our Swerve, we had to, in our chassis, we optimized the distance between the Swerve module and the servo module in order to have the shortest belt length. And additionally, we changed from a position rotation servo to a continuous rotation servo in order to have unlimited range for direction, for steering, and using one of the red 3-volt encoders in order to actually get position depth. So now we've been talking about the wheel unit, so we're actually going to delve into what we did. Originally, we had a PLA single core wheel with a 9A TPU tire, and transitioned over to a 3-part core made out of a 9-ohm blend and 85A negative flux TPU with the tire in order to properly grip the field.
Just like the design side, we decided to start the code side completely in-house, completely fresh, and then slowly iterate, take baby steps, and work our way up. So we actually started with literally just driving the motor, so spinning the wheel, and then iterating on the angle of the servo individually. And now we're at a point with our mono Swerve where you can flick the joystick one way and that directly corresponds to the way the wheel is pointing, and then you can adjust power as necessary. So we're slowly iterating, making our way towards a Swerve module that we can actually use in competition. And yeah, this is our first real working iteration. This is mono Swerve, and yeah, you can actually have a competition robot with just one Swerve module. However, you don't have control over the rotation of the top deck or the main chassis. And so adding more swerve modules gives you more torque and more control over the actual rotation of the chassis.
So we did actually run into a few issues with our monoswerve design, especially with the plastic we used to 3D print it. So the PLA that we used for the initial design warps really bad in heat, and we left it out in the car and it warped real bad. So it wasn't usable anymore. We did try to fix it, had to end up reprinting it. So what we're planning to do is switch to nylon instead of the PLA because it's more durable. And we also end up using our Dremels a lot on the swerve module, which reveals our tolerance, mistakes, and issues.
However, we're still not done. We want to convert the large base plate into a rigid one, also reducing the size so it doesn't conflict with any chassis we consider in the upcoming season. We're planning on releasing a full assembly instructions of how to build a swerve, a to-do guide, alongside a full bill of materials for this work.
One of our other projects that we've worked on this summer is RoboSpine, which is a kind of a model of the human spine that we can use in competition. And so it kind of started out with this little track that we found lying around in our coach's basement. And then we started playing with it, and then we were like, wait, we can do something with this for competition. And that kind of set off a whole set of innovation.
So like we stated, this started when one of our previous members started messing around with the cable chain, and then we got a sort of extendable version that we wanted to be implementing, and then our mentor suggested that we looked into the functions of the spine in invertebrates and how we could possibly apply that to robotics.
So biological spines are pretty complex. They deal with a bunch of different vertebrae, connect together with things like ligaments, tendons, cartilage, discs, a lot of biological features. And so each of these vertebrae are also different sizes and have different functions. We thought to look at how these vertebrae were connected and try to find a way we could replicate that using parts we had at our coach's house and parts we could design and manufacture as well.
Okay, so the early versions of this spine were vertebrae that were linked by basically just hinges. The first version uses hinges that basically click together. Very quickly found a problem with this design. It's not sturdy at all. Since they can click together, they can also click apart. So it fell apart very easily under any kind of load. So I made the second version, which instead of using click together hinges, it uses screw hinges. The problem with this is that in order for it to actually work, I have to limit the movement a lot. And we found that it was too limited. So the use cases were very limited in how we could use this design when the motion was that limited.
So we decided to switch gears and start to look at some of our own spines. So we decided to create something resembling cylindrical, like the bones that we have in our body, but some problems immediately arose. So we designed it to be printed in nylon, and then we realized that nylon isn't as flexible as TPU. And so we printed the nylon design in TPU, and then it had supports that were impossible to remove, and it was just a whole mess. And so the early iteration was rough, but we did eventually get somewhere.
So once again, we're back to the drawing board now. So we know that we have to make our robot design resemble something of a biological spine, but we've noticed that rigid hinges no longer work, but maybe we can still use something like cylindrical bones. So we realized that the yellow poles that made up the power play field were cylindrical, and maybe we could cut them and make them into something like our bones. Now all we need something is a joint. So we need something flexible. So we decided to go with these flexible TPU plugs that can screw into these cylindrical poles. And then we started ideating with that. And now we needed a way to control it. So we designed them to be hollow so we could put our wires through the entire system. And there are grooves built in for thread to go through, which can be controlled by a single actuator.
So here's RoboSpine. You would probably recognize the tubes from previous seasons, center stage and power plate. And then the red things in the corners, those are the device CPU joints. And everything is controlled by 2 strings that are actuated by that servo.
So this is our TPU joint. So there are these screws in the side, which house string that goes along the entirety of the spine. And then when you pull on the string, it bends it at this point here. There was also a slot for wires to fit through. We put it through the middle because if you put it anywhere else, then it would require the wires to be suspended so you don't break them. And then, so yeah, those are the guides for the strings that serve as tendons. So this is how the ringing is set up. This is how the string is kind of threaded through. You'll notice that there are 2 strings on one, what's it called, a spool? There are 2 strings on one spool. The way that we set this up is that, I'll explain it on actually the next slide, but this is how the string kind of goes through the spine. When it's bent, there are slots in the tubes that allow it to kind of cut across, which give us a larger radius from the center of rotation, which gives us more torque, and allows it to bend easier, and also allows us to use a servo. So that kind of shows it a little bit better how the string goes when it's bent. And this is how they're suspended on the other end. So as you know, when this one is pulled, it has to be pulled and this one has to be released, which means that we have to have some slack put onto this one. We use rubber bands at the very end of the spine to take up that slack, while still keeping them attached at different points so that it's still a rigid connection. This is inshore. So this is our very first prototype of the spine, and it actually sits right here. I think we can live demo it. And yeah, so it expands and contracts like a spine does, and it's got 2 wheels that serve as kind of the feet of the robot almost. But it can move and expand and contract, and it's the very first version.
All right, so after that initial version, we decided to think about some pros and cons and analyze our results. So first off, it seems quite impact resistant, which is great when you have to interact with other robots on the game field. Has a wide range of motion, and it extends and retracts, which allows you to fit into the 18-inch sizing cube. With only 1 servo, you're also able to control 2 directions, which is great for the servo allotment we have, and has inbuilt cable management through those tubes. However, we haven't really tested how strong it is, and that's going to be a major problem, as well as the de-spooling issue that Sol mentioned earlier.
There's still a lot of work we have left to do on the spine, starting with increasing the number of joints, and they don't have the springiness that we want them to have. So we're going to experiment with the interwall widths and infill until we've got the joint. Yellow doesn't fit our theme, so we want to change it to black, and there's just some overall developments that we want to make the spine ready for gameplay.
So finally, we have our third and final summer project. This is kind of our silly one, like what we did with our mechavation of industrial equipment. So this is our Hoverpong, which is fulfilling our mentor's dream of having a hovering beanbag. So as you can see, it is a hovercraft designed with a circular plywood base with a leaf blower attached with a 3D printed mount that can then inflate. And what's going to happen is there's a donut torus shape made out of trash bags that are duct taped together, filled with holes that'll inflate, causing with the air pushing to the center of the torus shape, pushing down, creating lift, which then lifts the person or the beanbag or whatever off the ground. And we have a demo. And as you can see, it has really low friction. It's easy to push someone around and we hover off the ground. So yeah.
questions now, if anyone has any questions.
This is about all three of the designs. Any one of the designs you have questions about?
One quick question, what problem that you identified was the robo-spine supposed to solve from the very beginning?
So technically, it's supposed to be to give the robot more flexibility. It's mainly a motion study. I liked the idea of a robot having a spine, so I wanted to build a robot with a spine.
Thank you.
What's going on with the expanding and retracting cable chain where it was rolling up? Not that, but the cable chain itself earlier.
Oh.
Was it like pulling on the string actuates it?
Yeah, so I pull on the string this way and it like rolls it up. I'm holding it. It rolls itself up and then let's go. And so kind of that same principle, if you apply it in both directions with two separate strings.
Then it gets you this.
Yes.
Cool. That's a nice tool for the toolbox.
Yeah, it was just a part we found lying around while we were cleaning.
Any other questions?
Do you have any online?
Any online?
Any online questions?
Oh, I have one more question. So the Swerve module is using the Rev4 encoder.
Turbo encoder.
Through board encoder to be able to register the servo and the steering?
Yeah.
Are you super happy that the octa-quad is now legal?
We were unaware of the octa-quad.
So the octa-quad gives you 8 more encoder ports.
Oh, we were not aware. We were aware of the octa-quad.
It gives you 8 more encoder ports,
Yeah,
so
we'll
now
take-
you're not eating up all of your motor encoder ports. So, cool. I was wondering if maybe you had like advanced knowledge or something that the octa-quad would be made legal this year. Okay.
Well, that
Lock
falls
that out.
that falls pretty nicely.
Luck is our primary team strategy.
All right, let's hear it for Iron Rain.
Like someone give me a hand with this. Yeah, you guys go ahead.
I was trying to describe what's the video? See which robot?